Here's a quick recap if you missed last month's video. I made a 2021 resolution to do one Bjorn Bear block a month, and I immediately failed. Instead, I made all 12 of the muzzle sections all at once. But this month, it's time to get started making some bears. First up, a whole heck of a lot of cutting. I cut all the background fabric for all 12 of the bear blocks all at once. That took a whole afternoon. The next day I cut the main fabric for my January and February bear only. I'm gonna admit something. I'm a slow cutter. I just am. I always have been. When I was growing up, my mom told me to measure twice, cut once, but my brain turned it into measure twice. Make sure I'm using the correct measurement. This is piece C, right? No, piece A. Measure again. Let's sing a song about piece A. Then I cut. It's a process. I've tried time-saving cutting methods, but they're not for me. They just help me make mistakes faster. Because I have such a relaxed timeline for this quilt, there's something so peaceful about just taking my time, enjoying the process, and watching the pieces accumulate, almost like magic. Anyway, here's an example of my slow cutting. It's a pleasant way to pass an afternoon. I like the nice, leisurely, unhurried pace. I don't have a bunch of quilts waiting in the wings. I can just be here, in this moment. The pattern has you cut out the inner ear section from each of your main fabrics, but I wanted a little variety, so I went spelunking in my scrap bin. I spent way too much time there. I just get caught up remembering my past sewing projects, my past quilting projects. I just ooh and ah, and I just stare at all the colors. I don't know what it is about a scrap bin. I just love it. Anyway, I cut way too many pieces, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna even use half of them, but worst case scenario, I'll have a bunch of pre-cut pieces I can do something with later on. A bunch of these pieces are sewn on a diagonal line instead of using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so it gave me a much needed coffee break. I got to sit down and do a little prep work, just draw on a bunch of corner to corner lines. Quick side note, these fabric marking pencils are great. I use them all the time. I use them to draw these diagonal lines, but I also use them to draw out my hand quilting designs on my quilt tops. And if you make a mistake, you can just dab them off with a wet paper towel and you just move on, and it's great. I love them. They come in pink and gray. I have those colors. And there's also a white one that I haven't ever used, but I'm sure it's great too. I'm going to put a link in the description below if you're interested. Here's a little peek at my organization box in action. You'll see there aren't any specific places for the eyes, the muzzles, or the contrasting ear pieces, and that's because they're so easy to tell apart just from looking at them. I just stack them on top of or near the section they belong to. It's worked really great so far. It has really streamlined the piecing process for me. If you're interested in making one of your own, check out my video, 3 Ways to Organize Complicated Quilt Blocks. I'll put a link in the description below. Now it's finally time for some piecing, starting with the eyes. We're going to sew each eye to the middle bar, and then we're going to sew the outer section to each eye. And we're going to do that with both colors. Then we'll move on to the muzzles and sew all those diagonal lines we drew earlier. And I've found that if you sew just outside the line, closer to the corner, it's going to press a lot nicer and you're not going to have to do as much squaring up. When I'm actively glue basting, I don't realize how much glue I use. I'm just trying to make sure my glue stays within the seam allowance, you know? But when I watch it back, it really looks like a lot of glue. I know I could just use a few dabs. For these, they're tiny pieces. I could just use a couple dabs, but I get into the zone or something, and all that just flies out of my head. I'm gonna have to actively work on that. Next up, after those pieces have been sewn and they've been nicely pressed flat, we're gonna fold them back and cut off all that excess fabric there. We don't need that in the final quilt. It'll just add bulk. So look at that, nice and flat. And then we're going to move on and add these little chin pieces. You can really start to see the muzzle coming together, can't you? Then for the eyes, we're going to just sew on the side pieces, and once that has been sewn, there you go. Look at that. So up here are the cheek sections, some more diagonal lines. And we're going to add the forehead piece to the eyes and just set aside the muzzles for now. A note on these cheek sections, that could be a lot of waste if we just sewed that line and cut off the excess, but if you add an extra seam, you're going to get a bonus half square triangle out of this cheek section. So I'm just going to use my ruler, get a nice straight cut here. And then look at that, just a little tiny half square triangle. I didn't have to do any extra cutting or anything. And at the end of this quilt, I'm going to have 24 of these little babies. I'm going to work up the lower face and the ears off camera, but here's a little sneak peek. I was really nervous to do the ear section, and I didn't want to do it with an audience, even if it was just my camera. Thankfully, the ears ended up looking pretty good. I was surprised. They worked up much more easily than I thought. So next month, I'll film the ear piecing in more detail. Anyway, let's skip to the best part, the reveal. I'd like to introduce you to January Bear. He's definitely my favorite so far. Look at those ears, not too bad. I love this light blue fabric. I've had it in my stash for like maybe 15 years. If you look closely, you can see there's little silver spots and speckles in there. And here is my February bear. I know this is probably all in my head, but doesn't he look more serious than January? Look at that guy. 2 down, 10 more to go. What do you think? Which one's your favorite? Leave a comment. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. If you're interested in more quilting content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It's free. If you want more behind the scenes info, come on over and visit my blog. I'll leave a link in the description below.